These are the hands of gifted craftsmen, scientists, creative engineers, test pilots, secretaries, doctors, accountants, artists. These are the hands of men and women welded into a team of extraordinary competence, working in the fascinating fields of aeronautics, astronautics, automation, and electronics. These are the men and women of McDonnell Aircraft of St. Louis, Missouri, aged 25, a free enterprise dedicated to the service of the community, the nation, and the free world. The story of this company has few parallels in the annals of industrial history. It is the story of a small two-story office building expanded to a vast plant of 5 million gross square feet of floor area, of a team of 2 grown to a team of 34,000, of 0 sales in the first year to cumulative sales of more than $4.5 billion only 25 years later. But mostly, it is the story of creative achievement in research, design, development, manufacture, and testing, and of a team working together on missions vital to the nation's defense and status in space exploration. In the sprawling plant that adjoins St. Louis Lambert Municipal Airport, the McDonnell Aircraft team is involved in some of man's greatest adventures, aircraft that fly at 2.5 times the speed of sound, that reach altitudes in excess of 100,000 feet, manned spacecraft designed to rendezvous with other vehicles in orbit and remain in orbit up to 2 weeks, hypersonic glide re-entry vehicles, which determine the effects of re-entry into the atmosphere on winged space vehicles.
3, 2, 1, liftoff. Roger.
Intriguing electronic devices in which astronauts simulate spaceflight
Roger.
and develop proficiency in joining with another vehicle in orbit. And electronic data processing, which aids in the design of aircraft, spacecraft, and missiles, and serves commercial customers in a variety of ways. For the accomplishment of these challenges, McDonnell Aircraft has reinvested 81% of its cumulative earnings into facilities unique in its industry. An engineering campus that provides company engineers with an environment conducive to creative work. A polysonic wind tunnel, which tests at speeds of Mach 0.5 to 5.6. A hypervelocity impulse tunnel for testing at Mach 27. Space environmental simulation chambers of 32 inches, 5 feet, 8 feet, 18 feet, and 30 feet in diameter. A super clean area, about 3/4 of an acre in size, for spacecraft assembly and testing. And acres of floor area for production of aircraft and spacecraft. Products as complex as man has ever known. McDonnell Aircraft today is one of America's most exciting industrial firms. But to a company old-timer, not a whit more exciting than the early struggles which laid the foundation for the company's present-day success.
You know, sometimes it's hard to believe that only 25 years ago this was all there was to McDonnell Aircraft. And we had only the second floor at that. These buildings were our engineering buildings. We thought they were great. During the war years, we had factories all over St. Louis. We were in this old Cadillac building on Sarah and McLeod. We used to boast that we operated in the world's largest garage. In those days, we were doing subcontract work for several of the big West Coast aircraft companies. We had only about 5,000 employees, and half of them were women. We kept competing for prime contracts from the government right from the beginning. And finally, it paid off in September of 1941 when we received one for an Army Air Force bomber destroyer called the XP-67. It flew in 1944. I think it reached a speed of 400 miles an hour, which was pretty good in those days. This is the XFD-1, the Phantom 1. I guess we made a pretty good impression on the Navy because it was New Year's Eve 1942 that the Navy phoned Mr. Mack and asked if our company was interested in designing a jet fighter that could operate off an aircraft carrier. Our company was only 3.5 years old. Only one other jet airplane had ever been built in America, but we did it. We flew it in 1945. I remember the day it hit 500 miles an hour. We wired the Navy, and they were just as thrilled as we were. Of course, the big test didn't come until July 1946. There were some 3,000 people on the USS Franklin D. Roosevelt to watch Commander Jim Davidson take off in our Phantom from an aircraft carrier. A lot of the spectators didn't share our confidence. I have a recording of it.
The McDonnell Phantom, shown in the Navy as the XFD-1, is a single-seat low-wing monoplane of conventional design. Ours of the Phantom is furnished by twin axial flow lifting out turbojet engines built into the wing loops, or in other words, right up against the fuselage. And there's signal lock. He's starting now, and you will really make me practice in front of our microphone here on the island of the FDR. Moving into the air with about 160 to 200 feet to spare, and American naval aviation history has been made as a successful takeoff of an all-jet plane has been made from an American carrier. See him as he circles around, he's dropping down, he is getting a cut from the landing signal officer, he's dropping down onto the deck of the ship, catches his arresting cable, and pulls to a stop just as quickly as does conventional type for a carrier aircraft. A beautiful takeoff, a beautiful landing by Lieutenant Commander James J. Davidson, making American naval aviation history as for the first time, an all-jet plane takes off, circles the carrier, and comes back into land.
And here's a snapshot of one of our first picnics. The kids loved it. We got to meet a lot of people. The last picnic I went to, there were some 25,000 employees and their families. And believe me, that's a pretty good-sized picnic. This is the F-2H Banshee. This was the second jet we designed. Note that this also had 2 engines. Our company always believed that the second engine was worth the extra cost because it added so much to the safety factor. And that's the way it has turned out. The Banshee was the only one of our aircraft to get into actual combat. It had a big role in the Korean War, mostly as a ground attack airplane in close support of troops. We also made a photo reconnaissance version of the Banshee. It was the first of 3 recces we built. We delivered nearly 900 Banshees. The Navy loved them. Not all of our airplanes, of course, went into production. This is an XF-85 Goblin, and we only made 2 of them. This was a great idea. It was an airplane which was designed to be launched from a B-36 bomber, go out and destroy attacking aircraft, and then return to its mothership. It worked, too. But it was still in the prototype stage when the B-36 began to phase out and be replaced by faster bombers. Then we got a contract from the Air Force to design and build this XF-88, a long-range fighter. Boy, were we delighted with this contract. This was really going to put us in the big leagues. We flew it at Edwards Air Force Base in California. It was fast and had plenty of range. Then one day we got the sad news. The Air Force didn't have the money to put it into production. But our company didn't give up. They spent a lot of money improving the design, and eventually it paid off. And in the meantime, we got an order to design the third in our series of fighters, the F-3H Demon. The Navy wanted a single-engine aircraft this time. We had quite a lot of trouble with an underpowered engine for a while, but we bounced back. And the Demon became a good airplane. It was used in the Lebanon and Quemoy crisis in 1958. And the Navy used it for many missions: combat air patrol, bombing, strafing, so forth. Just about the time we first flew the Demon in 1951, the company bought from the city of St. Louis this big plant at the airport. The company paid about $10 million for the plant, which I think was more than we had earned in the 12 years we'd been in business. This must have been a big decision, but there's no doubt it paved the way for our subsequent growth. One condition of this purchase was that the money the company paid be spent on airport improvements only. The year after we moved into our new plant, the Air Force finally decided to place a production order with us for that XF-88. But by that time, we had designed a supersonic plane, and we wanted the Air Force to buy it. This was a risky business because we knew it might open the door for a new competition, and we might lose the business entirely. But the Air Force finally bought our proposal, and we started work on the F-101 Voodoo. This is a great airplane.
The F-101 Voodoo, a great airplane indeed, and one whose achievements will live long in the memory of the men and women of McDonnell who designed and built it. The F-101A Voodoo, the long-range fighter bomber which set the world speed record of 1,207 miles per hour in Operation Firewall in 1958. The RF-101 Reconnaissance Voodoo, which in Operation Sunrun raced from Los Angeles to New York City in 3 hours 7 minutes and completed the round trip in 6 hours 46 minutes. The F-101B, two-place interceptor for the Air Defense Command. The F-101 Voodoo, the first supersonic aircraft to carry nuclear weapons. The first aircraft to be exposed in flight to an H-bomb explosion and then return safely. And in October 1962, an aircraft that flew scores of missions at treetop level over the island of Cuba, bringing back vital photographs that revealed the Soviet missile buildup only 90 miles off our shores. The F-101 Voodoo, a great airplane indeed.
Although fighter aircraft has been our principal business during the year, we've had a lot of activity in other fields. Here's a good example: the XV-1 converter plane that we developed for the Army. Now, as you can see, it operated like a helicopter. And then it went into horizontal flight, hitting speeds of 200 miles an hour. This was a research vehicle. We made only 2. We had previously done a lot of development work on helicopters. We made the world's first ramjet helicopter. We called it Little Henry. We made the world's first twin-engine helicopter. We called it Whirlaway. And we made a flying crane, which for a little fellow carried a lot of weight. We've been in the missile business too since 1943 when we started work on the Gargoyle, a guided bomb. Later, we built the Katydid, a target drone. For the past 13 years, we've been producing the airframe and ramjet engine for the Navy surface-to-air Talos. Our biggest missile program was the Quail missile for the Air Force. Now, this was a complex piece of hardware to produce. We had a lot of people working on it, and we did practically the whole job, including the support equipment and the launch system. The Quail is a unique missile in that it has no warhead. It's strictly a decoy. The Quails are launched in coveys by B-52 bombers. Because they fly at the same speed and altitude of the bomber and create the same blip on an enemy radar, the enemy can't distinguish the bomber from the harmless Quails. Still working on another missile concept which I think has good possibilities. An aeroballistic missile which flies within the atmosphere at hypersonic speed. We launched 3 of these from Cape Canaveral in 1959. In addition to our missile, we also make an asset glide re-entry vehicle which flies at hypersonic speeds. Now, this is an extremely interesting product. In the first place, it's made out of so-called exotic metals which are terribly hard to fabricate. Secondly, we get some very valuable data on re-entry by winged space vehicles. Asset was first launched at the Cape in 1963. It traveled 11,000 miles an hour and landed right on the button. And now we come to the Phantom II. We were in real tough competition for this airplane, and it meant an awful lot to us, and for that matter, to St. Louis. It was a big day when we won it. We would have had to lay off 6,000 people if we lost this competition. You know, some people seem to feel that government contractor gets its business on a platter. Nobody better suggest it to anyone who was in on this competition. The Phantom was christened with considerable difficulty. The bottle wouldn't break by Mrs. Bethel Milne, wife of the Secretary of the Navy. She was a good sport. They finally popped the cork. I guess you know this Phantom is some airplane. Well, you ought to see it take off. It flies at approximately 2.5 times the speed of sound, and it's flown to altitudes in excess of 100,000 feet. All in all, it established 15 world speed records. It set a world speed record of 1,606 miles an hour. It set a 3-kilometer record of 902 miles per hour at a reach of only 125 feet above the ground. How do you like that? Navy pilots flew it from Los Angeles to New York in 2 hours and 50 minutes. And it set 8 time-to-climb records. Listen to this. From a dead stop, it went down the runway, took off, and flew 7.5 miles high in 1 minute and 17 seconds. But the surprising thing about the Phantom is the fact that it also can slow down to 130 miles an hour for landing on a carrier or for a short runway. Now, this is important when it's used to support ground troops. You probably gathered that the Phantom is a very versatile aircraft, and you're right. Because of this, it's now in service with the Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force, and that's a rarity. The true measure of the airplane, of course, is its capability for combat. For one thing, it can fire missiles at enemy aircraft or against ground targets. It can deliver conventional bombs. or it can streak into its target below the level of enemy radar detection to deliver nuclear bombs. The military call it the best aircraft of its kind in the world.
And so we would be up to date on the McDonnell story had it not been for an announcement by the newly formed National Aeronautics and Space Administration in Washington on January 12, 1959. McDonnell Aircraft was awarded a contract to design, develop, and construct the nation's first manned spacecraft for Project Mercury. Time magazine called the award a payoff for pioneers, and indeed it was. For McDonnell engineers had been working on the concept of a manned spacecraft with company funds for more than a year prior to the award. When NASA asked for proposals, a McDonnell team was ready. Work started immediately. In 2 months, a mock-up had been built. Fabrication of the spacecraft began. And then came testing, more testing than had ever before been given a manned vehicle. The first manned spacecraft was delivered in December 1960, only 23 months after the company had received the contract. Now the suspense was building up. The eyes of the entire world were focused on the little McDonnell product. The company's prestige was on the line. Each member of the team sensed it. Finally, it was May 5th, 1961. Astronaut Alan B. Shepard was blasted into space by a Redstone rocket. Some 15 minutes later, America's first manned space venture was pronounced a success. 2 months later, astronaut Gus Grissom flew a similar mission, and America was ready for orbital flight. It was February 20th, 1962, that John H. Glenn entered his spacecraft mounted atop a huge Atlas rocket for his historic adventure. By mid-morning, he was on his way. At a speed of 17,544 miles per hour, he circled the Earth 3 times. 4 hours and 38 minutes later, he was safely down in the Atlantic. In the space race, America was catching up fast. John Glenn wasted no time in returning to the plant where his spacecraft had been built. Mr. Mack summoned the team.
This is Mac calling all the team. We are gathered here around our Mercury spacecraft number 13, a number now full of meaning for our team. Number 13 came home to St. Louis last night. Number 13 came home, but only to stay briefly, because she has now made history, and under her christened name, Friendship 7, has lifted up.
He paid his tribute to company personnel and to NASA, and he introduced John Glenn.
What turned this hardware into the glorious Friendship 7 epic of America was the superb pioneering astronaut who breathed the spirit of America into this vehicle as he rode her, subdued her, and brought her home with masterful skill. Therefore, joyous we are today to have with us John Glenn, who stands here representative of the 7 astronauts for whom Friendship 7 was named. This astronaut, this great American, needs no introduction to you.
Mr. Mack paid special tribute to all the engineers. With all due respect to all the engineers, it took a lot of you that I'm looking at here today to put the actual hardware together. And I know that the way it was put together and the way the mission worked out, there was more went into it than just a wage that you were earning here in the plant. Your hearts went into it as ours did down at the Cape, too. For that, I thank you very much.
Astronaut Scott Carpenter duplicated Glenn's 3-orbit mission 3 months later. Wally Schirra flew a nearly perfect 6-orbit flight in October, parachuted safely in the Pacific Ocean in full view of those on his waiting aircraft carrier. Finally, there came a fitting climax to the great adventure. On May 15, 1963, astronaut Gordon Cooper was rocketed into space for a 22-orbit, 580,000-mile journey around the Earth, consuming 34 hours, 19 minutes, and 47 seconds, before landing only 4 miles from the USS Kearsarge in the Pacific. Project Mercury was an unbelievable success. The men and women of McDonnell Aircraft, engineers, technicians, craftsmen, et al., had earned the gratitude of the people of the free world. An honored visitor made this eminently clear. On a day that will forever remain memorable in McDonnell Aircraft history, the late President John Fitzgerald Kennedy walked down the steps of Air Force One to the McDonnell ramp before thousands of cheering personnel. Greeted by Mr. Mack and Company President David S. Lewis, the President shook the hands of personnel as he walked to the speaker's platform. He was welcomed by the company's founder.
This is Mac calling all personnel. This is Mac calling all the team. Our little aerospace company has a new high today. We are honored to have with us the President of the United States. Many of our teammates here know...
McDonnell workers watched and listened intently as Mr. Mack shared the historic occasion with them.
...in going into space as a means of peaceful competition and a way of finding wonderful and creative substitutes for war while giving release to the competitive spirit of mankind. I present to you the President of the United States.
Mr. McDonnell, Senator, Governor, Mr. Mayor, I want to express my very warm thanks to all of you. I know that some of you are on the first shift, and some on the second shift, and I appreciate very much your coming out and saying hello. This is a most important effort in which you're all involved. Building these planes, which help protect the security of the United States, and the dozens of countries which are associated and allied with us all around the world, which would not be free if it were not for the power and the determination of the United States.
The President explained to an appreciative audience that it was essential that the United States be first in space. And then to the McDonnell team came the ultimate in praise for a job well done.
And I can imagine no action, no adventure, which is more essential and more exciting than to be involved in the most important and significant adventure that any man has been able to participate in the history of the world. And it's going to take place in this decade. And I congratulate you on what you have done, and I congratulate you on being part of this adventure. Thank you.
And so went the first 25 years for the McDonnell Aerospace team. A team of talent and of spirit, to whom the past is merely a prelude to the future.